On March 30th, 1993, CBS aired David Copperfield's 15th television special, Fires of Passion. One of the special guests starring in effect was hockey legend Wayne Gretzky and LA Kings owner at the time, Bruce McNall. Gretzky and McNall had purchased the Honus Wagner T206 baseball card at a 1991 Sotheby's auction. The card was advertised before the auction as the finest condition of the most sought-after card. Before the auction, estimates ranged on what experts believed the card was worth. Gretzky and McNall ended up paying $451,000 for the card. During the television special, David Copperfield had Wayne Gretzky sign his name on the baseball card using a marker. Copperfield folded and then tore the card into 4 pieces. He then restored each piece one by one. After the card was restored, he magically ironed out the wrinkles using his bare hands with a puff of smoke. Wayne Gretzky then pointed out that the baseball card still had a signature on it, in which Copperfield responded by magically removing the signature. It was an incredible piece of magic that is still talked about to this day. It has influenced many magicians who have since approached the torn and restored card plot. However, it is important to note that it is not the first piece-by-piece torn and restored card. In the past, magicians had approached the piece-by-piece restorations using special apparatuses. The first modern piece-by-piece restoration using no apparatuses was created by David Regal. David Regal first published his effect piece by piece in the 1987 book Star Quality, written by Harry Lorraine. The piece-by-piece restoration that Copperfield did perform did leave the magic community with some unanswered questions. The first question that is still debated to this day is, was it a camera trick or did it use a real-world method? Before we explore the answer to that question, it is important to find out the history behind the Copperfield effect. Magician Doug Bennett was actually the person to suggest to Copperfield to use the Honus Wagner baseball card. In a 2006 Magic Magazine issue, the story was told that David Copperfield told Chris Kinner about an idea for the ultimate torn and restored card using the most valuable baseball card in the world, the Honus Wagner card, an idea he got from Doug Bennett. Doug Bennett later shed some light on how he came up with the idea. Doug said, "Back in the 90s, I was big into sports card collecting, and when I saw in the national news that Wayne Gretzky and LA Kings owner Bruce McNall had purchased the rare T206 Honus Wagner baseball card for $500,000, I contacted David Copperfield with the premise of tearing up and restoring the world's most valuable baseball card. David loved the idea, and he worked out an ingenious method to accomplish the visual tearing of the card and the restoration. The next thing you know, Gretzky and McNall arrived at David's warehouse with a $500,000 card." While Doug Bennett was the magician who suggested to use the baseball card, it was Chris Kinner who developed the method used by Copperfield. After going through several complicated methods one night, Chris woke up from a deep sleep and he says, "The method for the trick hit me like a brick. I got in front of the mirror and played around with it. It was simple, direct, pure sleight of hand." The effect that Kinner created was given the name Torn Asunder. Copperfield also commented on the effect on the audio commentary for his Illusions DVD. Copperfield said, "People thought that this was done camera trick-wise. It's not. It's quite legitimate." Finally, a notable person in the magic community posted on the forums.geniemagazine.com website on August 2nd, 2001. "I recently had a conversation with Chris Kinner about his method with the baseball card which David Copperfield performed on TV, the performance of which I believed inspired Guy to create Reformation. Kinner's method, contrary to popular speculation, is quite practical and can be done in front of a live audience. He has many other methods that close-up workers could use. While I can't say for certain, given the comments by Chris Kinner, David Copperfield, and others, I'm going to say the effect performed by David Copperfield used a real-world method." The second question is a hard one to answer. Was Torn Asunder ever released? In the February 1993 issue of Genie Magazine, an ad appeared for the torn and restored card effect performed by David Copperfield. The ad gave the effect the name Torn Asunder. If purchased, you could receive a 30-page manuscript with 38 illustrations, plus an instructional VHS tape. It mentions in the ad that the effect was created by Chris Kenner and Gary Ollett, with additional tips from David Copperfield and Don Wayne. It specifically mentions that David Williamson's pull-off signature and Cameron's puff of smoke system were not included. The ad stated that the release was limited to 25 sets, numbered and signed by Kenner, Ollett, Copperfield, and Wayne. Finally, Torn Asunder would retail for the price of $500. Before we try and answer if Torn Asunder was ever released, let's first look at the two products mentioned in the advertisement. The ad specifically said that David Williamson's pull-off signature and Cameron's puff of smoke system were not included. Of course, David Williamson's pull-off signature was part of his 51 cards to pocket effect that was published in the 1989 book Williamson's Wonders, written by Richard Kaufman. The other product mentioned was Cameron's puff of smoke system, which was detailed in a 1991 manuscript. They even had an update in the back of the book in the special addendum section. We have now established that the two products mentioned in the ad are real, but what about the actual product advertised? Let's break down the names involved. Gary Ollett is listed in the credits of Fires of Passion Special as a production consultant. It is worth noting that Copperfield in 1995 performed a modified Gary Ollett idea, which Copperfield called Grandfather's Aces. Ollett's version was called A Dream of Aces, which was first published in 1993 as a booklet and VHS tape. It was later sold as a DVD and booklet. It is interesting to note that the ad for A Dream of Aces incorrectly states that it was performed during David Copperfield's 15th television special. It was actually performed during the 16th television special named Unexplained Forces. You can find the other names mentioned in the Genie magazine ad in the Fires of Passion credits. Don Wayne is listed as a magic consultant. Chris Kenner is listed as magic coordinator. And finally, Doug Bennett, Chris Kenner, and David Williamson are all listed for their magical contributions. For years, I searched online auctions, used magic websites, magic forums, and conventions, trying to track down the Torn Asunder booklet and VHS tape that was advertised. And I got nothing. Other magicians have searched and tried to obtain Torn Asunder too. A few years after the 1993 ad appeared in Genie, a classified ad appeared in the December 1995 issue of Genie by a magician named Lloyd who was searching for Torn Asunder. Later, in the 1996 issue of Magic magazine, Michael Close shares a funny story about a letter he receives from a magician who had recently purchased the Torn Asunder effect but lost the instructions. Michael Close said, "I even got a letter from a man who had apparently purchased the trick for $250 at a swap meet, but lost the instructions, and could I fill him in on the details of making the gaffe?" And since the 90s, we haven't heard much about Torn Asunder, until I stumbled upon and purchased this. So here it is, the unboxing. I'm opening the package from the bottom so you don't see the address information on the top. The first thing we see is the 1993 issue of Genie magazine that has the Torn Asunder ad in it. The next item is a VHS tape by Gary Ollett called Close Up Illusions. And here is what we came to see, the Torn Asunder VHS tape. There it is. There's the tape. And finally, a signed David Copperfield program from the 90s. So here it is. Let's take a closer look at the Torn Asunder VHS tape. Let's open it up and take a closer look at the tape. Wow, I can't believe I finally found it. But wait, let's rewind. Did I really find one of the 25 sold Torn Asunder VHS tapes? The answer is no. This tape is a fake. Let's take a deeper dive and find out if Torn Asunder was actually ever released. Let's start our investigation on a popular spot for magicians using computers in the 1990s, Usenet. One of the most popular Usenet groups for magicians was Alt.Magic. Doing a search reveals several discussions about Torn Asunder effect performed by Copperfield. However, no users claimed to own it or are trying to sell it. After years of researching the topic, I have found nothing. I'm going to say that it is my opinion that Torn Asunder was never actually released. The last question we are going to try and answer is, was the Ad and Genie just a hoax or practical joke? For this answer, we head back to Alt.Magic. This forum post from 1996 claims that the Ad and Genie was a hoax, as the user says, to play off the usual excitement that magicians have for buying a commercial version of an effect performed on TV. However, this user incorrectly claims that In a Puff of Smoke System was never commercially available. If the poster was wrong about the smoke system, maybe he's wrong about Torn Asunder being a hoax. However, different posts on different magic forums all claimed that the Ad and Genie was an elaborate hoax, and many claimed that Gary Olet was behind it. Unfortunately, Gary passed away in 2002, and without a way to get in touch with David Copperfield or Chris Kinner, it appears that now that some aspects of this story will remain a mystery. So was the Ad and Genie magazine just a hoax or a practical joke? We will mark that undetermined at this time. While we might not know the whole story behind Torn Asunder, it has influenced many magicians who have approached the Torn and Restore card plot. Guy Hollingworth, who created a modern Torn and Restore classic called Reformation, said, "There was all this talk of the Torn and Restored baseball card that David Copperfield did on one of his television specials. In that version, you actually saw the bits of the card go back together. I started with the Wagner method, but doing the restorations visibly. It wasn't that hard to do, but always had a glaring discrepancy with one of the corners or another not matching. At university, I thought of a few new ways of doing it, one of which seemed awful and cumbersome. After trying them all, I went back to the awful and cumbersome method and discovered that it only seemed awful because I hadn't really practiced it enough." I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching.